Hey guys, welcome to another How to Hot Shot. Today is all about banks and how they impart holds on people's money even when they're transferring it in between their own accounts. So this is a important thing if you're hot shotting because obviously you'll get paid, and I'm sure that more than a couple of you guys are going to find this situation or already have, where if you take your own bank money and you try to move it to another bank, aside from the IRS surveillance called PLAID, there's a chance that they're going to put a hold on it. Now, this is not allowed. You can't hold someone's money for withdrawal. That's not a real thing, and it's a sign that the bank is unhealthy. All these years I was warned, well, there's going to be banks are going to freeze people's money, and you don't believe it until you go to use the card at an ATM and it says invalid card. That it's not just declined, it's just invalid. And I'm not a Russian terrorist. And by the way, if you're Russian, I love you guys. I dated a Russian for a while. I was best friends with one. You guys are awesome people if you're in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. But the fact is, having my assets frozen was not in my playbook. So even though I had, just for disclosure, a $4,500 payment come in, I couldn't put it through Current, my fintech, because they have a $2,500 check mobile deposit limit. So I had to open a Bayport credit union, and this could happen to any Bank of America user, any Wells Fargo. I've had it with all the big banks. And first of all, they put a hold on the card from like July 16th to July 31st. That's not a thing. Depositing a check, I should be able to cash it that day. They said, well, it's not on our bank stationery. Whatever, as a person who's vetted, I should be able to do that. And it doesn't take you long. So all of this is a way to say in the background, if your money gets held up, this can cause a serious problem. It can put you out of service. It can leave you unable to get fuel. Now, the way that I've cured this, I'm going to give you guys this tip, is to use a couple of techniques. One of them is that if you have money in things like your factoring account, or if you take a card payment that it's in Square, do everything you can to spend it off of that platform, meaning using the Coinbase USD card, using DAT Outgo, my factoring company, or if you're using Love's factoring, using that Love's card to actually spend the money. Because the moment that you move it off, even though it's instant, even though we have real-time payments, that's what it's called, RTP. All these banks support RTP. You can still be left in the lurch when they don't complete that transaction on time. So what will happen is instead of it being, oh, it's delayed by a few hours, it can be delayed by days. And that's not a real thing. This is all a made-up way to depart you from your money. And regardless of whether or not it feels like everybody's having this, it is a specific thing being done to you. Now, with that said, my lawyer has let me know that he says they're not shooting at you, Yossarian. And if you guys Google that phrase, what this is about is a soldier back in the war who was sitting in camp, and every 5 minutes there was a freaking German shooting someone nearby. And he's like, why are they always shooting at me? And his friend goes, they're not shooting at you, Yossarian. They're shooting at everyone. But here's the problem with that. Not being singled out, being targeted. It doesn't matter the reason or the why for. To you, it could be you or you and everybody else. You have to be elite. You have to bank professionally. You have to bank at a higher level, an elite level that's not like them. You need to be better than everyone at banking. So the reason why I strongly recommend that you use Current, I'm not sponsored by them and I've not had a perfect experience, but the reason why is, like, for instance, if you go to the pump, and they're supposed to do a $75 limit, but you only have $35 in your account. Pray this never happens. You understand I'm talking about small money, but realize this. When you tap that card at the pump, even if you tap your phone, it is instantly going to authorize for the amount that's on your account. Now, if you're surprised by this, because they used to tell you the pump, it's their fault. Your bank can't do anything about it. The fact is, yes, they can. It's your bank refusing to pay the pump the minimum amount, right? So as it turns out, if you tap to pay with Current and you've only got 35, but that pump authorizes 70 or 90 bucks, you can lift that handle and pump your 30 or 35 bucks. In addition, all right, because that's only useful if you're poor. But in addition, if you tap the pump for 75 and you only dispense 50, if you hang that handle up, by the time the receipt prints and you want to tap again, your money will refund. Okay, so the difference between 50 and 75 will appear in your account instantly. Now, you're saying, how could that be? The merchant might not have settled. So it's two things, right? One of them is Current automatically from the day you get the account assumes that if you have a pending refund from a merchant, that they can safely credit it. It's almost like factoring. They assume that that invoice will be paid because every time, eventually, the money is going to come back. And it, without fail, it always happens on the automated side of things. And in addition to that, by paying you, the chance is that you're going to go out and spend more money, right? Which works good for their business. That said, Current has always been responsive to help requests. And after about 7 years of using it, we only had one instance where my dad went to send me money for the house that we bought. And he was 5 hours away at his house. And he deposited $200 and he says it vanished. But I'm not convinced that, since he doesn't know how to search something on his screen, he couldn't scan a QR code. I'm not convinced that that was, I've never had an issue with it. With that said, his money came back, but it was a long time coming. With that in mind, you have to realize that most people hit a problem with their bank every day. There's a 7 to 10 day hold. They go to a merchant and get refunded, and it's like 48 hours until that happens. Imagine if you went to buy a candy bar and they accidentally rung up $45 and your max balance is $50, right? And then they're like, oh, sorry. And then they undo it. That $45 is gone for the day. It's gone, probably into tomorrow. With Current, it comes back instantly. So make a point of noting that that comes back from the merchant inside. It allows you to quickly tap at the gas pump. And because of the fact that it's not a $350 mud flap authorization every single time you tap to pay, I actually end up using Current to fuel my diesel truck once in a while. Because if you have the ability to take money from outgo factoring and then instantly deposit it in Current, there's not going to be a hold, there's not going to be a wait, there's not going to be a we are authorizing and verifying and all this other kind of stuff. And before you say, well, why wouldn't you use Cash App? There's a myriad of reasons why Cash App is a consumer product. And while Current markets itself as a consumer product, it has many professional investing features that are really important, not the least of which is the ability to transfer money into your brokerage account instantly. So for those who are invested, it's a really important tool. That is your like debit card. That is your general debit card. With that said, you understand that diversifying your portfolio is as important as diversifying the amount of banks that you have. Having a savings account and a checking account with one institution, a fintech checking account with another institution. Yes, you can add a Cash App. Yes, you can add a Chime. But in addition to that, adding a Coinbase, adding a Kraken, having a brokerage account that accepts Bitcoin over the Bitcoin or Lightning Network or at USDT or USDC, whatever it is, having all of the, and I highly recommend, by the way, this is a free tidbit for those of you guys who are interested in investment. Don't use a US Forex broker. A Forex broker in the United States is 100% going to be required to report like played, right? Get a broker in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I used to use Cedar FX, which was an eco broker. For every $10,000 traded, they would plant a tree. And I've got a lot of trees out in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what they do is they're an ECM broker that's called basically unregulated. And the United States loves to scare consumers away by calling brokers that don't auto-report to the IRS regulated brokers or unregulated brokers. So the gimmick here is that most people assume that if you're using a unregulated, it equals shady, right? But that said, how many loads have you pulled for a Class B broker? How many times have you done a load for a Class B broker? The only difference being that you have to get payment directly from them because factoring won't touch them, right? A lot of times they're higher paying loads because they struggle to find truckers who are willing to do quick pay or they're willing to do 30-day wire transfers, whatever it is. So the thing about these brokerages that happen is that they almost always come with their own web trader. So that way that you can log in and trade, you can day trade Forex, you can day trade stocks with $100 in your account. And they almost always provide massive leverage. And on top of that, when you go to the IRS at the end of the year, you get to accurately report. There is a situation that Americans get into that literally ruins families. And it's this: in the event you have Bank of America and a Forex broker, and you take money out of BOA and you put it in a Forex broker, right? That's going to be a one-way thing. Let's say you take the money back out, right? Then you're going to be taxed on your profits. But then you take the money and then you're like, I don't know, I want to put it back again. Moving money around should be as easy as pushing cash around a table. There should not be a fee. This is not a casino. It's how to bank, right? So using Current, using Coinbase, or better yet, Kraken, right? I can't speak fully for Kraken. This is something that my buddy, he runs a very high balance. He uses Kraken and loves it. All of those things are very important. With that said, Current will offer you credit, right? You can have not a credit card, a build card, but you can run it as credit, and you have a debit card that you can also run as credit. There's two different, so it's a total of four: physical credit, virtual credit, physical debit, virtual debit. All four of those are different cards you can use, right? You're gonna have your DAT or your factoring card. You're gonna have your Loves card. You're gonna have, if you have a checking account that you use just to cash checks, right? You can have that. I don't recommend, I made the mistake recently of having to start a Bayport account. I would use Chase. Chase Bank is by far the best. They offer merchant services. They do really good stuff. And when you're banked heavily like this, it doesn't matter if you have money in the accounts, because most of these services don't charge a minimum fee. Chase is the only one, other than Bayport. Chase and Bayport are the only ones that require that you have a minimum balance in the account at the end of the month. And if you have that minimum balance, there is no fee. So obviously they're doing something with the money that is illegal and shady and not allowed, which is funny because a minute ago I thought it was the foreign brokers that were doing this shady and illegal things. It turns out the more regulated, the more USD fixed, the more shady activities and the BS you got to worry about affecting your life is actually going on. And a lot of times it's not behind the scenes. It's very in your face. The reason is twofold. First of all, when you become a trucker, you are graduating. You don't have to become a trucker to do this. Just owning a corporation or an LLC, you go from debtor status to creditor status. That's very important because it means that you create more in life than you intake. So you can work construction and make $55,000 a year, and you are a debtor. You are a debtor consumer. You are a product of the financial, basically you're being sold financial products, right? The difference is that when my friend comes out from Tennessee, who's across at Longhorn Steakhouse, by the way, I don't know why a person would ever eat in a Longhorn Steakhouse, but it's perfectly valid Texas Roadhouse nearby, but he is going from a debtor, meaning that people are collecting on him, to a creditor, meaning that when people owe him money, he collects on them. That's a very important thing, because when you are that way, eventually the system's going to recognize this guy clicks business on the account type, right? When you book into a hotel, you're putting your company name up there. Your EIN is going to have more activity than your SSN. I don't know the last time I used my SSN, right? If I'm not calling my phone company, though, anybody who picks up the phone, can I have your EIN or SSN? They prefer an EIN first. So that means that your company entity is going to be the tax body that needs to have input and output, not you. So every time you as a company open a checking account and transfer money into your own personal account, you are basically taking responsibility for that entire amount. Now, here's what's important to know about current, right? You as a person can also write off a lot of your taxes. So because of the fact that you are the owner of the company, you are the person to which that EIN is affixed, right? You can say, well, this money went through my personal account, but these are the itemized receipts that apply only to the business side of things. So if I know I've only fueled my truck between the months of February and July, any fuel receipt, any gas or diesel station receipt automatically gets not applied to my taxes. And you might ask, well, how? Because if you allow the system to run on automatic, it will take everything that it can from you. Now, I only have another couple of minutes because my truck bed is currently a yard sale of clothing drying in the sun. And on top of that, I keep my truck bed very, very clean. On top of that, my ignition is on to charge my phone when there's a perfectly valid air-conditioned charging station off to my starboard side right now. The kind of point that you need to understand is that everyone's tax situation is a little different. So just like you're going to try to, you want to hire somebody to help you with dispatch, you want to hire a CPA and tax accountant in order to get the best out of it. Because there are people who can write off 175% of the value of their truck in the first year in the event that you are paying it off. I paid my truck off in a year. You don't have to do it that way. But the point is that the expenses that go through a company that has yet to be profitable for the entire amount, if you look at the IO of the company, input output, then all of that kind of stuff matters. Now, when you start to use consumer banks, this is why I'm making this video. I'm warning you guys not to become a consumer. You have to put business on everything, because if and when you don't, they're going to really hold you up. So be very cautious about using big American banks. Even if it says Bank of America or Wells Fargo or PNC or whoever it is, right? All of those entities are going to treat your big ass transactions as really weird. And even if it's a small transaction, even if it's $350 to $1,000, they are still going to look at you weird. It doesn't matter. In addition, recognize that any transaction over $650 must be reported to the IRS, right? So that's a very important thing to understand. And as is the fact that if you send money out and it comes back on a different name invoice or it comes back from a different merchant, that's not going to get automatically seen as input and then the same input back output again, right? It's going to be looked at as two different taxable profitable transactions. So you have to be aware of that. That is a less problem than the ability to even get your money in the first place. Because right now, Bayport is showing two different balances. I don't know why it does that. And both of them very high and both of them inaccessible. I transferred some of that money to Coinbase. Coinbase showed it up, but it's saying that that entire amount is held because the bank refused to transfer it. It's been like 10 days since I did that. So in that time, Bayport has been sitting on the money and refusing to authorize any transactions that go on. I swiped my debit card and it said that the PIN was invalid. And I said, I've had this card a week. How could the PIN be anything less than valid when I'm the one that set it and no one else has access to this card? Right? For you saying that you've changed my PIN, you're admitting that you've done fraud. So I went to the fraud department, filed a complaint, this, that, and the other. And I'm basically, the way that I decided when Verizon decided to really screw me is that I am going to take so many man hours. I'm going to use so much of your customer service time that it doesn't make financial sense for you to be in business. I, with Verizon, have used thousands of man hours of their time just to cause them to change a problem that they're having, which is in an 8-month span, I only got the same bill twice. And in the preceding 2 years, there was only one other time that I got a bill that was the same as the month before. It ranged from $55 to over $700 randomly. And that's not allowed. You can't do that anymore. And they're like, PS, set up auto pay. If I set up auto pay for you, then that card has to be unlocked to the rest of the world, and that's money going out that I have no control over. I've had people charge me $200 to $500 for no reason at all, only to come to find out it's an error. Now, the reason I say use current is if they ever did charge you and you got them to refund it, it would be this instant. It would immediately come back to your account. There are situations where their bank holds it, but I would say it's less than 10% of the time. So keep that in mind as you go forward. It's just something to think about, staying away from big banks because that will put you out of service. You guys have a good day. Thank you much. And thank you for listening to the warning. Please like these videos. I've had great engagement so far. I'd like to keep it that way. Peace.